Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. It's a very popular trope in a lot of games where you end up at some point, whether it's a story based thing or part of the gameplay, that you will end up going to a dungeon, a jail, a prison, some sort of lockup where you are locked away and you have to either escape or wait it out. Games like Skyrim have jails where you can be arrested, Witcher has traps that you can get locked away in, some games like Batman even have special rooms where you get locked in and you must find a way out. Other games like Watch Dogs, you purposely have to be arrested as part of the story to get into a prison. So there are many different ways it can work. And in my game, I figured since we're doing a semi-RPG style game, it'd be really cool to have the player able to be arrested by the guards and put in a jail and have to escape somehow. So over the next few parts in this series, what we're going to look at is adding a brand new jail system to the game, where the AI guards can arrest you if you trespass where you are, do something wrong, blah 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 blah. Then they can take you to jail. What I've done in my world is flatten the landscape out, and I've got a hold of the new Sinti Kingdom pack, converted one of the rooms. It looks a bit barren on top, but it will look better once I pimp it out. But when you come in, you can see I've pimped out the back rooms to have jails in them, like so. So what we can do is turn these into jails where the character is stuck in first person mode and they have to find a way out. We can do certain things, like maybe some cells you'll have to just keep repeatedly punching when the guard's not there to try and break out, or the guard comes and stands near you and you can pickpocket him. And I've done 3 rooms of it, so we've got plenty of different jail cells we can do. So I figured in the first part we'll actually make it so we can, with a click of a button, spawn the player inside one of these cells. So let's get started. I'm thinking when we're arrested, we'll basically loop over the nearest jail that we have and we'll place the player inside one of the jail cells randomly. Ones which aren't populated, because you might want to put NPCs in there at some point which you can add to the story. You know, you help the guards to take down a person, they get arrested, you can go and see them later because it's Hannibal Lecter kind of style where you need their help. So that can also work for us. So let's start by creating a blueprint that's going to actually house the jail cell, and then what we will do is we'll create another blueprint afterwards which localizes them to actual jails, and then when we are looking to put the player in there, we can loop over all the jails, find the closest one, and then find the cells within there. Because we don't want the player to be in one city, get arrested and teleport to the other city, hours away, because that's not going to be very fun. So let's start with the cells here. I'm going to come to my blueprints folder here, and inside here I'm going to go into, I'll just create a new folder, I think. I'll call it jail cells, and I'll go inside here, and I'll right click blueprint class, actor, and I'll call it BP_jail cell, and I'll open this up. So the first thing we're going to need is we're going to need a static mesh inside here, which is going to house our actual cell, and then what I will do is I'll duplicate this and call it cell door as well, and I'll place this inside the cell like so. I'll then come and grab the static mesh for my cell here, and I've got a few varieties I could technically use, but some of them are a bit longer, so I'm just going to stick with one for my purpose. And on the cell I'll add it in like so. And then what we can do is we can click this, we can find the relevant door, so we'll use that one, and then I'll click the cell door and I'll add it in as well. You can see it's not in the right position, but if I come and look at the actual cell door here, it gives us pretty much the location it needs to be for it to be perfectly in the middle. If we come and paste that in, boom, it's now sorted. I don't know why they're different colours. I think it's to indicate to the player it's a door, so that's fine. One thing I'm going to test just before we continue is I'm going to come and drag this cell in and just make sure it's facing forwards, because otherwise we might run into a few issues later. But let's drag the jail cell in. So you can see the green arrow is pointing forwards and the door is also pointing forwards, which is good, because then it means when we spawn the player, we can say spawn them forwards and the door will be in the right position there, and then we can just open it however we want, like so. Perfect. So next we need to actually store whether somebody is actually inside this jail, and if so, who is it? Because it might be a case that when we're looping through it, we may want to know who's actually in it so we can interact with them, for example. So we need to find the lightest object possible, so when we do store it in memory on the jail, it doesn't really matter because it's really lightweight. So I'm going to come and open up my NPC, and for the same as my player as well, I have added an interface called BPI character here. An interface is just a set of functions that an actor can run, but that's all it stores. It doesn't store the skeletal mesh, the static mesh, any of the materials. It's just the functions. On my interface here, you can see I've got a bunch of different functions here, but that's all it's going to store. It's going to be a few megabytes tops in memory. We can store the actual interface on our jail. I'm going to come and create a variable here. If you don't have an interface, I do highly recommend creating one. It's really really useful going forwards. All you need to do is right click blueprint interface, call it BPI character, then go to your character, in this case I'll use Manjaro cell, class settings, and apply it inside implemented interfaces. You then have to actually implement the functions, but to implement the interfaces, all you do is come to the interfaces tab here, and then just double click the ones you want to set. So on my get faction, I'll double click it, you can see I'll implement the code there, but this character doesn't have a faction in them, so that's fine. So now that we have our interface, I'm going to go to my variables, I'm going to call it characters in cell. And you realize I've called it characters, and what we're going to do is actually make it an array of characters and state how many characters we can have in a cell. So if you've got a big cell, like the double one that we had here, if you've got a double cell, like the one here, you can fit multiple people in there, and you very well may want to fit multiple people in a cell, but we don't want to overcrowd it and just keep adding people there. So characters in cell, and I'll set it to the type of BPI character, which is the interface we've just created. We can come and pick array up here like so. And now we can store an array BPI characters. We don't need to make this public because we don't really ever need to see it, but I am going to come and create a variable called max characters, and I'll set this to an integer, and I'll make sure it's classed as a single. I'll then hit compile just so we can set default value, and I'll set the max characters default to 1, so there'll only ever be 1 in there, and I'll make sure it's instance editable so we can set that. And now what this means is when we drag in our jail cell, we can come and set how many characters are allowed inside this cell. Now you could get even more extreme with it and start placing markers inside the cell to where characters are supposed to spawn, and that could work, but I'm not going to go that far with mine just yet. We might revisit that in a future video, but now I'm just going to spawn them all in the center of it. It does mean that if we ever spawn multiple AIs, they will collide with each other. When you move an actor, you can tell Unreal somehow to separate them, so that's fine. Perfect. So we want to make sure that both of these have collision on them, because otherwise the player is going to be able to escape. And you can see on here, block all dynamic, which is perfect. It's all got collision, and nav mesh is enabled, meaning AI won't randomly walk into it or walk out as well. Even better. So the first thing we need to do is actually make it so the door can open or close. Thankfully on my door, the root is at one point, so all we have to do is open it like so and then close it like so. Nice and easy. So we just need a way to handle that. So what I am going to do, because our jail is going to need to talk to the jail cells as well, and the character will have to interact with the jail door to open it, I'm actually going to come and add an interface for the jail itself, so other things can contact the jail without actually having to reference the jail cell. I'm going to come up to my blueprints folder, and I'm going to go inside my interfaces. I'm going to right click folder, and I'll just call it jail cells because we're getting quite a few interfaces now. And I'll right click blueprint interface, and I'll call it BPI underscore jail cell. And I'll open this up. Now I need to declare a bunch of functions that this jail cell will want. So what have we got? We've got open door, we've got closed door, and we've also got a third one of is unlocked. And this will tell us whether or not we can actually open the door. So when we decide to interact with the jail cell, we'll first check is unlocked, which will check has the lock been open, have you done the mini game, whatever you need to do, and then we can proceed to call open door. And then the function we will add is open, which will tell us the state of the door. Is it already open or not? Now with is open and with is unlocked, we actually need to export out whether it's unlocked or not. I'm going to click add output down here, and I'm going to add an output called open as a boolean, and I will also do the same for unlocked, where I will just call it unlocked. And now when we call those functions, we can easily find out, is the door unlocked? If it is, close it. If the door's open, then close it. If it's not open, is it unlocked? And then open it. So we've got a series of ways we can perfectly tell on the jail cell. And let's go back to our jail cell and implement this interface by going to class settings, implemented interfaces, and I will just add jail cell like so. And I'll hit compile and save. And you'll see if we go to the event graph and just delete off these events, we now have a bunch of interface functions to handle what we need. So to start coding these functions, let's start with the most basic one, is open. So I'll just double click it and you'll see we've added a function. So we need to return true if it's open or false if it's not. So the easiest way we can do this is just to create another boolean inside here called jail is open, because if we call it is open, it will conflict with the is open function. So I'll just call it jail is open and I'll set it to a boolean, and I will just simply drag this in and connect it to open like so. And that's the first function done. And what we can do is when we actually call open and close and we open the door, play the sound, the animation, whatever, then we can just simply set jail is open to true. Next, I'm going to come to the is unlocked one, and again, I'm just going to add a new variable called jail is unlocked, and I'm actually going to make this one instance editable because you might want to start off with the jail actually unlocked, and all that the player has to do is just open it because you might have an incompetent guard or something. So then I can drag this one out and just connect it to is unlocked like so. And there's the two easy functions done. So now we can move on to the open door one here, and you'll see this has gone to an event because it's not got a return node, and it's a good thing as well because we're going to use a simple basic timeline to just animate the door opening and then closing again. I am going to come and tidy up our variables a little bit, so I'm going to come and click characters in cell, And I'm actually just going to set the category to private, just something that's hidden away. And I'll also drag in jail is open, just then it categorizes it away nicely so we can only really deal with the ones we need to. So how do we actually start by opening the jail cell? So if you've never used a timeline before, a timeline is a built-in function to Unreal that runs from point A to point B for however long you tell it to. So we can say between a value of 0 and 1, take 5 seconds, and it will loop over it and give you points throughout the 5 seconds ticking upwards, which is perfect for a door when you want it to swing open, say in 1 second, it'll go 1 second, just like that, and we can animate it to do that. You may already have door animations, you may have physics-based doors, either way. So one caveat of using a timeline is you need to be able to give it a starting rotation, in our case a starting point, and an end point. So what we're going to need to do is actually cache the rotation of the door when it begins the rotation, and then the end rotation when we know we want it to open. Because if you don't give it a starting rotation, then each time it's ticking, it's changing the start location when it's getting the new location. So you need to give it a fixed start point, which is something you will miss from time to time. I still miss it. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag in the cell door here, and I'm going to drag off and do get relative rotation. Then I'm going to promote this to a variable, and I'll call this starting rotation. You may wonder why we're using relative rotation instead of world rotation. Relative rotation will get us the rotation inside this blueprint. So in this component's eyes, that point there is 0, 0, 0. And if we rotate it, it will be 0, 0, 90 kind of thing. Whereas in the world, it could be something completely different depending on the orientation you set the jail cell. And it may rotate backwards, forwards, and you don't want that. So if you use relative rotation, it's what it is inside this blueprint's parent. It's relative to the parent. Then from here, we can now officially start our timeline. So I'm going to drag off and do add timeline, and I'll just call it T_open door. T for timeline. Then from here, we can actually double click the timeline to set it up. So the length of the time, how long do you want your door to take to open? I'm going to set mine to 0.5. Doors don't generally take a long time to open. And I'll click add track at the top. You'll see we get a bunch of options. So I'm just going to click float track, and I will call this door open track. Inside here, I'm going to right click and do add keyframe, and then right click again, add keyframe. I'll then click the first one, and I'll set the time to 0, so at the start of it, and the value to 0. So very, very start of the door opening. And then the time end, the last keyframe, to 1 and 1. 0.5 and 1. There we go. And now we've got a smooth timeline where it will open from 0 to 1, and it will calculate it. Half a second, it will give you all the values to 1. So what do we want to do from here? So now we actually want to rotate it. You see the track we created, the door open track, is available for us to use. Perfect. So I'm going to grab the cell door in, like so. I'm going to drag off, and I'm going to do set relative rotation. And I'll connect it up to the update, not the finish, because the update will run every time the timeline updates. Then I'm going to drag in our starting rotation variable, and I'll drag off and I'll add a lerp. A lerp is how you get between one value and another value, and you can give it the increments in between how it needs to go to it. So if you have 0 and 10, and you set your alpha to 0.5, that will be half of the two values, so you will get a result of 5. So if we increment the alpha going up, for example, over a time, such as the door open track, then it will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it'll count up over the second we've got. So we can connect this return value to the new rotation, but what do we set the opening position to? Well, we can actually set this to another variable. I'm going to drag this off and promote it to a variable, and I will call it open door rotation. And I'm going to actually make this one publicly visible. The starting rotation I'll drag into private because that's just a temporary cache variable, but the open door rotation is what we can actually use on child blueprints or other doors to say where it's supposed to open. So the open position, well, at the moment this is closed, so I'm actually going to rotate it to where I want it to be open. I'll say about just like that. Yeah, it's a nice wide opening, and I can come and grab the rotation here. So I just hold shift and right click on it to copy. I'll go back to my open door rotation. I'll make sure I've compiled so I can be the default and paste. So by default, that'll be the open position. While we're here, I will actually just duplicate it and call it closed door rotation. And now we set it back to what it was. So if I just come and undo the changes, I can copy it and set it back. Now, closed door rotation is just 0, 0, 0, and you could just get away with keeping it 0, 0, 0. But if you've ever got a weird jail cell where it doesn't close fully or something, you've got the option to modify it if you need. And now back in our event graph here, we've now got the open door rotation and the starting rotation rotation. I do recommend ticking shortest path. Every so often, when an animation is running, the curves could go wonky for some reason, and the door might think the best way is to go 360 degrees around itself through the cell to try and get to it. For example, if the door is open like this and you try to close it, it may think the best thing to do is to go like that, which makes zero sense, but that's what curves do. You may want that for some things. Shortest path simply says calculate the distance between that and doing that, and then take the shortest route, which in this case, it'll just go close like so. So back in our event graph, we've now got that bit pretty much set up. So it comes in, it opens the door, it then sets the relative rotation via the lerp. I'll drag this across because we now need to add on finish to jail is open. So I'll come and drag that variable in as a set, drag it up to finish and tick it like so. So now we've actually updated our variable to say the jail is open. Perfect. So next we need to actually close the jail cell. So what I am going to do is actually use the benefit of the T open here, and I'm going to drag in to reverse here. So if the open door goes 0 to 1, reverse will go 1 to 0, which is perfect. Then instead of just simply ticking jail is open, I'm actually going to come and set it to the opposite of whatever it is. So if the jail's open, then it will mark it as closed. If the jail's closed, it will mark it as open. So I'm going to drag jail is open as a get. I will drag off and do not boolean, which will reverse whatever the value is, and then I'll connect into here. So by default, the jail will be false because it's not open. We open it, which will run based off this function here, and then it'll come down, jail is false, turn it to true, set jail is open. Now the one last little thing we need to do is we actually do need to cache the current rotation again, just here, so we do remember where it is and drag that into reverse like so. So that is our pretty much simple door opening function. So let's set up a dead quick basic example just so we can actually test the door. So I'm going to come back out to where my player is. I've just put the start point here, and I'm going to drag in our jail cell blueprint, and I'll just put it like so. I'll rotate it so we can see it. Then what I'm going to do on my player is I'm going to come and add a debug key just so we can press it and make the jail door open, just so we can actually test if it's working. So I've already got a U key set up here just to trace out some things. So what I'm going to do is actually come down and just type debug key, and let's just pick key. Why not? You can pick any key you want. And then all I'm going to do for testing is just add in get all actors with interface, and we'll use our brand new BPI jail interface, and I will loop over this. So what I'm going to do is drag off the array element, and I'm going to do the is open message here to actually get whether the jail is open or not. I'll add a branch afterwards. If it is open, then I will drag off the array element and call close door, and if it's not open, then I will call open door like so. So the only other thing is we can't actually call open door straight away, so I'm going to double click this array element, then I will drag off and do is unlocked. Can actually tell is the jail cell actually unlocked, and if it is, then we can add a branch to the unlocked, and if it is, we can connect it true like so. Now we can hit compile and save, and that's the basic logic that we'll use for our interaction on the jail cell shortly. So for now, let's do a test. So you can see we've got our jail cell. If we press P, you'll see nothing will happen. The jail cell won't open. If you tap F8 on your keyboard and click the jail cell, you can see it's not unlocked, so it won't open, which is perfect. So we'll unlock it and we'll go back to the game and we'll press the P key and you'll see it will unlock successfully. Perfect. But if I press P, nothing happens. It doesn't close or open again. We go back to our jail cell. I've actually made a slight mistake, and on the lerp here, we're only ever passing it the open door rotation. So we reset the starting rotation to this one, and then for the open door rotation, we're just setting it back to the same thing. So what we can do is drag this across a little. So when this originally runs, when we call play, it goes from 0 in our instance to 1. That's what the value does, and then we lerp between it. The problem with this is it works for when you're going forwards, because the starting rotation is the position you're starting from. The open door is the position you want to get to. However, if you're going backwards, then no matter what you set the starting rotation to, if we set it to closed door rotation, it's just going to reopen itself because it's going backwards. It's not going the same forwards. So what we actually have to do is drag this set starting rotation up here and drag off the direction and add a select node in. This simply picks between two different nodes. Into the return value, I'm going to drag it into A so it knows it's returning a forward or a backward rotator. I'll just make this a bit neater. The B value will always be open door, because if we're going forwards, then we're using the starting rotation and going to the open door rotation. However, if we're closing it, then the door's already open and we are going back to the backwards rotation, which is our closed door here. So an easier way to look at it is if you're going forwards, it's going starting to open. If you're going backwards, it's going open to closed. So it's going that way and then a loop around. And this should give our door the ability to open and close. The jail is currently locked, which is perfect. And then if we press the P key, nothing happens because the jail is locked. If we come and tick the jail is unlocked and come back into the game, we can now press P and the door will unlock, and press P again and the door closes. And you'll see if we come and lock the jail, for example, you've lost a key so you can still shut it, we can press P to shut the jail, but then we won't be able to open it again. Perfect. So we have our miniature jail set up now. So what's next? Let's replace all the jails in here with the actual jail we need. I'm going to come and click on the jails here, and I'm going to find all the doors. I'm actually just going to remove all the doors so they're not a problem, and then we'll mass replace it in a moment. That's it. So all the doors of the jail cells have now disappeared, which means now we can come and select all the jails I've got. There we are. I can right click and I can do replace selected actors with BP jail cell, and this way it will keep all the same rotations and it will simply replace them like so, which is perfect. And what we can do now, if we jump into the game and run and visit the jail cells, you can see we press P, nothing happens. If we select all the jail cells and then click jailers unlocked for them all, when we press P, they will all unlock at the same time. There we are. There's our jail cells, nice and open. It'll work for every single one just because we've added the debug key. If you do stand in the middle of it, it will just push you out of the way, look. Yeah. So that's the basic jail cell that we need. So next, let's look at a way of actually teleporting the player inside the jail cell, because that's what we need. We need the player to ideally just be put into the jail cell. If I come back to my BPI jail cell, I'm going to add a new function here called add character to jail, and it's going to take an input value of character and it will grab their BPI character like so, and I can hit compile and save. Now back in the jail cell here, we can just wrap a comment around all of this called door opening / closing, and then we can come and double click on the add character to jail here. Actually, while we are here, we will duplicate this and remove character from jail, because we always have to do the opposite, and we will give it a character we need to remove as well. So that might be used when you actually escape, or if a guard comes and says you're free to go, kind of thing. So we'll come and we'll also double click remove character from jail. So to add a character, the first thing we need to do is actually just populate the array. So we'll drag characters in cell in, and we'll drag up and do a contains item. We'll first check if the character is already in the jail, because it could be a glitch if we are, and we don't want that. So what I'm going to do is say if the character is already in jail, then on false we'll print out an error, and we'll just say error, character was added to jail twice, and we'll set it to red so we can see it. We'll set the duration 5 kind of thing. So if, for example, 2 guards come and try to take us to jail at the same time, this will stop it if they accidentally call at the same time. It gives us a little bit of leeway on the code. And then if it's, that's the wrong way, to connect that to true. If it's false, because they aren't in jail currently, we can grab this characters in cell, drag off and do add. And we can connect this up to the false, and then we can simply drag the character into it like so. So this is the part where it'll actually add the jail to the cell, and we'll deal with teleportation in a moment. Let's just quickly get the remove out of the way. So we'll drag this contains and this, we'll drag all of this code and just paste it below, but we're going to change it. So we're going to drag the branch into here. We're going to check if the cell currently contains the character. If it doesn't, so that's false, then it means we're trying to remove a character who isn't part of the jail. So we'll throw another error saying character was not in jail. However, if they are in jail and they've been released, we can drag off the characters in cell and simply call remove item. This is where the character is free to go. They've been let go, they've broke out, whatever. There we go. So we can hit compile and save. So how do we want to actually action adding the player to jail? So this is where we need to start thinking carefully about it, because if we add the code here to teleport the character in, then it will be the same for NPCs who get sent to jail and for the player who gets sent to the jail. And you're going to want it to be 2 different ways. So for example, when the player gets sent to jail, in Skyrim's version, the screen fades to black, you wake up in jail. You don't want the screen to fade to black when an NPC is going to jail. That's something different. So what I am actually going to do to make this easier is I'm going to reverse this around. So the jail will simply store that somebody's been added to jail, but then it will actively tell that person go to jail. And then we can code it on the player or the NPC to act whichever way it needs to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and find our BPI character that we created at the beginning, and then I'm going to come and add a new function called send to jail. And then the inputs will be a type of BPI jail cell. So this will be the jail cell they're going to. So the input will be jail cell, and this will actually be the type of BPI jail cell, and it'll be the cell they have to go to. I'll also add a function called remove from jail, where we'll also pass the same input of jail cell, and this will basically say spawn outside of the jail cell, open the door for the player, etc. We'll hit compile and save. So if we go back to our BP jail cell now, where we add the character just at the bottom here, what we can now do is drag off of this and simply call the send to jail, and we want to make sure it's inside the BPI character. And we'll connect it to the add here. The jail cell we want to add it to, we can just simply call cell by cell. And we're going to do the same thing for the remove down here. So we'll just give ourselves a bit of space. We'll double click this node here, and we'll drag off of here and do remove from jail, and just make sure you click the BPI character one again. Connect it up, and again, just like before, it will be for cell. So now we've got a really custom way of adding a character to jail and telling that character to go to jail. You could have the character literally walk to the jail if you really wanted to, but in my case, I'm going going to do it differently. So I'm going to come to my ALS character BP because that's my player. Just basically go to your player wherever you attach the BPI character. And on the interfaces, you will see we have the remove from jail and the send to jail. Let's just jump back to BPI character and we'll categorize these to make it a bit easier. So send to jail, I'll add to a category of jail, and I will do the same for remove jail. And we'll hit compile and save. Because the character does a lot. So now inside the jail category, we'll double click send to jail and remove from jail. Now we don't need to really worry about setting the character, adding them to the correct array and such like that. That is all taken care of by the jail. This is simply a node that we call to say teleport them there. Let's do just that. If we go back to BP jail cell here and go to viewport, where do we want to spawn the character? Well, we want to spawn them right in the middle, just here. So we can actually just get the actor location and put the player there. In the future episodes, when we do look at adding multiple spots, building a whole system where it picks a free available spot. But for now, we're just going to use the base location. Now I'm going to come back to my BPI jail cell. I'm going to add a function called get cell location. And I'm going to add an output, and it'll be a type of vector. So I'll just call it location. And I'll set the type to be vector. And this is going to say where the character needs to spawn. So I'll hit compile and save. I'll go back to BP jail cell event graph. I'll double click the interface get cell location, which it wants an output. We can just simply do get world location for the cell. So that'll get the root position of that cell, which will be in the middle there, which is exactly where we want to spawn the player. And we'll hit compile and save. I'll go back to ALS BP character. From the send to jail, I'll drag off the jail cell and do get cell location. And then from here, we can just teleport the player. So I'm just going to drag off of location and I will do set actor location and rotation. And we'll make sure it's plugged in. The new location is there. We will add the new rotation to the get cell location shortly, and we don't need to tick anything else. So the only other thing we need to do now is actually have a way to call send to jail. So I'm actually going to come and remove this door open and close thing here. All of that, we don't need it anymore. And from the out actors, I'm just going to come and call random like so. And then from here, I'll just drag off and call add character to jail, where we're talking to the jail cell. The character we want to add is ourselves. And we can hit compile and save. So let's give it a try now. So in theory, if we press the P key, it should find a random jail cell and teleport us into it because we've been added to jail. And because all the jails are locked, we won't be able to get out. And now I'm free, I've broken here. Hey, the guards are like, you're not allowed to do that. Take him to jail. And we go to jail. There we go, look. We are now in jail. Now, there's definitely some improvements we need to do. Firstly, I think it's going to be better if we convert to first person mode when we're in jail, because it looks a bit weird doing it like this. And in first person mode, it could work quite nicely. Secondly, the character's in the floor. So the reason the character is in the floor is there must be a collision issue which is stopping them. You can see though, we definitely can't get out. If we press P, we'll get added to another one as well. Look. So you can see we are in fact going to jail, which is very nice. So let's sort the issue then. So to start with, we actually need to semi-battle Unreal's collision setting. So let me show you what I mean. If we come and select the actual mesh for the jail cell and we drag it into the world here, even though the jail cell is open, you will see we won't be able to actually get inside of it. And this is due to the way Unreal tries to optimize collisions, which for 90% of the world is absolutely perfect, exactly the way it is. But by default, when you drag a mesh into Unreal, it will generate two types of collision for it depending what your settings are. The first is the simple collision. It does the absolute most basic shape, highly optimized to put around your model and give it basic collision. For example, that signpost won't have each individual sign handing off, it will be a simple cube around it. And that's going to be the same for our jail here. So you'll think that will be okay, because a cube around it's nice and efficient, you don't need to reach your arms through the bars, that's fine. However, that simple cube is a solid cube. There's no gaps in it because there's a door or no floor. It's a full thing. So you'll see we can't get in. Why can't we get in? Well, I actually have a handy debugger tool that I simply added, which is a line trace. If I press U, you'll see it's hitting it right there. And even if I center a line, it will still hit on the outside. And that's because Unreal's solid tool has gone around it. So if I go into the actual mesh and double click it, you can see this. So if I come to show and click show simple collision, you can see the collision that Unreal has generated for it. It's simply just a cube, but the key is you can see right at the doorway, it's locked it off. And for 90% of the time, if you drag a model in where it's got an arch in or something, you won't be able to get through it because simple collision is active. Like I say, it's highly optimized. The way around it in our case here is to actually enable complex collision. So I'm going to come down into the details and scroll all the way down to the collision drop down, and you'll see collision complexity. So it's set to project default, which for most people is to use simple collision, but I'm going to come and change it to use complex collision as simple. Remember, it's more polygons. So if I come and click show complex collision and untick simple, you can't see it because I don't know what's up with my Unreal, but what it's basically done is added collision around each individual box. So we've gone from one cube tube to many different ones. So each individual bar has one. Now you might think this is overkill. However, for what we're planning to do with this, where you can pickpocket guards through the cell, if there's collision there, you can't get through it. So we actually need it turned off anyway. The other option you have to get around this is to come and create your own custom collision preset. Now you can either add in a complex collision mesh, which is basically a very low poly mesh with no materials, and it just says treat this as collision. The other option is to build it up manually using primitives. So you will drag boxes in and say this side has a box, this side has a box, this side does. We'll look at that in the future because maybe it is a little bit overkill, but for now it should be okay. It's not gonna destroy your game just to have a few, but I would not recommend it in a full game. But now that we've done this and we've set it to complex, you should be able to walk inside this jail cell without an issue. You can see I can now walk inside the jail cell just like that, meaning if I press the P key, we also get put into jail properly. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. Our character is in jail. Look at him. Poor sad person. He's in jail. And we can also press P again to just keep teleporting between jails at this rate. There you go. And you'll see eventually we'll actually hit the same jail because we're not removing them every time we click it, and it'll say error, we've tried to add the character twice. But there we are. We are now officially in jail. So this video is getting quite long, so I'm going to leave part 1 here. Yeah, and what we've basically ended with is a bunch of different jail blueprints that you can press P, or you can go and trigger it yourself however you like. If you hit a spike pit, send them to jail, where it will go and add your player into jail in the correct way. In the next few episodes, we're going to look at all sorts of different things, such as adding transitions for the player going there, so we could fade the screen for black, make them appear. We can look at adding sounds, making AI guards capture you and take you in if you steal something, for example. Then we can also look at putting NPCs in jail. And then finally, we'll start looking at opening the jail door, the little mini games to try and get out. We could even look at lockpicking one day as well. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like to see some more things to do with these jail cells, let me know below. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.